The miracles of Jesus were never meant to simply amaze people. They were meant to reveal something the world wasn't ready to see. And what makes them powerful has nothing to do with how impossible they seemed. There's a miracle where Jesus arrived 4 days late, and that delay was the entire point. Another where a man gained his sight and lost everything else. One where religious leaders had to choose between undeniable truth and the systems that gave them control. And then there's the moment when Jesus didn't perform a miracle at all. He just pulled back the veil and let 3 men see what had always been true. These 10 moments don't just show us what Jesus could do. They show us who he is, his authority, his compassion, his willingness to let people reject him rather than force them to believe. The miracles didn't convince everyone. They exposed everyone. Before we walk through these moments, we need to understand what miracles actually were in the ministry of Jesus. They weren't performances, and they certainly weren't given to convince people who had already decided not to believe. In the Gospel of John, miracles are called signs. A sign doesn't exist for its own sake. It points towards something greater. It reveals. And what the miracles of Jesus revealed was authority that didn't fit into any category the religious world had prepared for. Some miracles drew crowds, others scattered them. Some made Jesus famous, others made him a wanted man. The raising of Lazarus, for instance, didn't just amaze the people who witnessed it. It triggered a murder plot. The religious leaders gathered in urgency and said plainly, "This man must die, or everyone will believe in him." That's the tension we have to hold. Miracles weren't neutral. They forced decisions. They exposed what people actually wanted, and more often than we realize, what people wanted was truth. It was comfort, control, or confirmation of what they already believed. Jesus healed a paralyzed man, and the crowd marveled. But before he healed the man's body, he forgave his sins, and that's what enraged the scribes. The healing was spectacular. The forgiveness was offensive. It claimed an authority that only God possessed. He opened the eyes of a man born blind, and instead of celebrating, the Pharisees interrogated him, excommunicated him, and accused Jesus of being a sinner. The miracle didn't change their minds. It threatened their position. He cast a legion of demons out of a man who had been living among tombs, tormented and isolated for years. The man was restored. He was clothed. He was in his right mind. And the townspeople begged Jesus to leave. So as we walk through these moments, we're watching revelation. Each miracle answers a question. Who has authority over death? Who has the right to forgive sin? Who commands the wind and the sea? Who sees the faith that no one else notices? The miracles reveal Jesus, his identity, his mission, his heart, and they reveal us too. What we do with those moments says everything about whether we're seeking God or just seeking relief. The most dangerous miracles were the ones that revealed authority no human being was supposed to have. Jesus received word that Lazarus was sick, Lazarus whom he loved, Lazarus whose sisters had sent an urgent message, "Lord, the one you love is ill." And Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He waited until Lazarus had been dead for 4 days, long enough that when Jesus finally arrived in Bethany, Martha met him on the road with words soaked in grief and confusion. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." She believed in Jesus. She believed he could heal. But she also believed he had come too late. Jesus told her that Lazarus would rise again. Martha nodded, thinking he meant the resurrection at the end of time, someday in the distant future, in the theological category where hope goes, when the present has nothing left to offer. And then Jesus said something that changed everything. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. Not I will bring resurrection, not I believe in resurrection. I am the resurrection. Resurrection isn't a distant event. It's a person, and that person was standing in front of her. Jesus went to the tomb. He wept, fully human, fully grieved. And then he called out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the man who had been dead for 4 days walked out of the tomb, still wrapped in burial cloths. There's a reason this miracle stands apart. It was a direct confrontation with the one enemy that every human being ultimately faces. Death had taken Lazarus completely. There was no ambiguity, no chance of misdiagnosis, no possibility that he had merely been unconscious. 4 days in a tomb in the heat of the Middle East left no room for doubt, and Jesus undid it with a word. But here's what makes this miracle so pivotal. It revealed his authority. Power can be impressive. Authority is something else entirely. Authority doesn't ask permission, it doesn't negotiate, it commands, and reality obeys. The religious leaders understood that distinction immediately. After Lazarus walked out of that tomb, the chief priests and Pharisees convened the council. They didn't deny the miracle. They couldn't. Instead, they said, if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. So they decided that Jesus had to die. The miracle that proved Jesus had authority over death is the same miracle that set in motion his own execution. Lazarus walked out of the grave, and Jesus walked toward the cross. That's the cost of revelation. Jesus didn't arrive late. He arrived when death had exhausted every argument, when hope had bled out completely, when there was no human explanation left. He arrived at the exact moment when only God could act. The man had been blind from birth. He had no memory of color, no reference point for light, no mental catalogue of faces. His entire existence had been shaped by darkness and the voices of people passing by. The disciples saw him and immediately turned him into a theological question. "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" They wanted an explanation, a reason, someone to blame. Jesus gave them neither. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. This happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Then Jesus spat on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and spread it on the man's eyes. He told him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. The man went. He washed. And for the first time in his life he saw. You'd think that would be the end of the story. A blind man receives sight. Celebration follows. Everyone marvels at the goodness of God. That's not what happened. The Pharisees interrogated him. They demanded to know how he had been healed, who had healed him, and whether the healer was from God or a sinner. The man answered plainly, without pretense. I don't know if he's a sinner. One thing I do know, I was blind, and now I see. They didn't care about his sight. They cared about their authority. When the man refused to condemn Jesus, they escalated. They brought in his parents, trying to trap them into admitting something, anything, that would discredit the miracle. His parents, terrified of being thrown out of the synagogue, distanced themselves. He's of age, ask him. So the Pharisees turned back to the man, now healed, and cast him out. He gained his sight. He lost his community. After the man was excommunicated, Jesus went looking for him. He found him, and he asked, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" The man said, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus answered, "You have seen him, and he is the one speaking to you." And the man worshipped him. He had been healed physically by Jesus. Now he was meeting him personally. The miracle opened his eyes. The encounter gave him something far greater, identity, belonging, purpose. Revelation often costs something. It disrupts. It exposes. It forces people to choose between what they've always known and what they can no longer deny. The man born blind lost everything familiar, and in losing it, he found the only thing that mattered. Would you still follow truth if it cost you your place? She had been bleeding for 12 years. 12 years of isolation, 12 years of being ceremonially unclean, 12 years of spending everything she had on physicians who couldn't help her. The Gospel of Mark says plainly that she had suffered much under many doctors and had spent all that she had, and instead of getting better, she grew worse. She was invisible, untouchable, cut off from community, from worship, from the ordinary rhythms of life that everyone else took for granted. And then she heard that Jesus was passing through. The crowd pressed in around him. He was on his way to heal Jairus' daughter, a synagogue leader's child, someone important, someone whose need was publicly acknowledged. But this woman had no invitation, no appointment, no intermediary to plead her case. She had only one thought: if I can just touch his garment, I will be made well. So she pushed through the crowd, reached out, and touched the fringe of his cloak. Immediately she felt in her body that she was healed. And immediately Jesus stopped. He turned and asked, "Who touched me?" The disciples were confused. Everyone was touching him. The crowd was pressing in from all sides. But Jesus knew something different had happened. Power had gone out from him, not taken, given, freely, fully, in response to faith that didn't announce itself, but simply reached. The woman came forward trembling and fell before him. She told him the whole truth, her condition, her desperation, her hope that had brought her to this moment. And Jesus spoke to her with a tenderness that reframed everything. "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." He called her daughter in front of everyone, publicly. She had been invisible for 12 years, and now she was seen. She had been unclean, and now she was welcomed. She had been nameless, and now she was called by the most intimate term of belonging Jesus could offer. This was a restoration of dignity. Faith doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be eloquent. It doesn't need a platform or a pedigree. Faith is trust placed in the right direction. And when it reaches for Jesus, even in desperation, even in silence, even when no one else notices, heaven responds. The woman had no words. She had only enough strength to reach, and that was enough. Jesus healed her body. He stopped everything to honor her faith, to speak her value out loud, and to send her into peace. Faith does not always announce itself, but heaven recognizes it every time. Jairus was a synagogue leader, a man of standing, a man of influence. And he came to Jesus in desperation, falling at his feet and begging him to come to his house. His daughter, his only daughter, was dying. She was 12 years old and she was slipping away. Jesus agreed. He started walking toward Jairus' home, and then he stopped. The bleeding woman reached out and touched his cloak, and Jesus turned to acknowledge her, to restore her, to speak dignity over her in front of the crowd. It wasn't long, maybe a few minutes, but for Jairus, standing there watching, every second must have felt unbearable. His daughter was dying, and Jesus had stopped to talk. Then the message came. Messengers from Jairus' house arrived with words that landed like a verdict. "Your daughter is dead." Why trouble the teacher any further? It was over. Too late. Whatever hope Jairus had carried as he ran to find Jesus, whatever belief had brought him to his knees in public, all of it collapsed in that moment. But Jesus heard the message, and he turned to Jairus and said, "Do not fear, only believe." They continued to the house. By the time they arrived, the mourners were already there, weeping and wailing loudly. The death was public, undeniable, final. Jesus looked at the scene and said something that sounded absurd. "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead but sleeping." They laughed at him. He put them all outside. Then he took the child's father and mother, along with Peter, James, and John, and went into the room where the girl was lying. He took her by the hand and said, "Talitha cumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately she got up and began walking. There was no drama, no performance, just quiet, sovereign authority speaking life into death. Jairus had been afraid that Jesus was too late. The messengers had been certain of it. The mourners had confirmed it. But what looked like delay from a human perspective was precision from the throne of God. Jesus raised a dead girl, and the difference matters. If he had arrived earlier, people could have said she was never truly gone. If he had rushed, they could have credited urgency instead of authority. But he arrived after death had already been declared, after hope had been formally buried. And then he spoke. What feels like delay to us is often precision to God. He doesn't move according to our panic. He moves according to his purpose. It was the fourth watch of the night, somewhere between 3 and 6 in the morning. The disciples were alone in a boat, straining against the wind, making no progress. The waves battered them from every side. They were exhausted, frustrated, and frightened. Jesus had sent them ahead after the feeding of the 5,000. He had gone up on the mountain to pray, and now they were out on the sea, struggling in the dark. And then they saw him, walking on the water, moving toward them across the surface of the sea as if it were solid ground. Their first reaction wasn't faith, it was terror. They thought he was a ghost. They cried out in fear. But Jesus spoke immediately. "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter, impulsive as always, shouted back, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus said one word, "Come." Peter stepped out of the boat, and he walked on water. For a few incredible moments, he did the impossible because his eyes were fixed on Jesus. But then he noticed the wind. He saw the waves. He felt the chaos around him, and fear replaced focus. He began to sink. "Lord, save me!" he cried. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" They got into the boat together, and the wind ceased. The disciples, overwhelmed, worshipped him and said, "Truly you are the Son of God." This miracle reveals something essential about the way Jesus operates. He walked toward them through the chaos, in the middle of the night, when they were exhausted and afraid. And he invited Peter into that same chaos. That's the pattern we often miss. We assume that Jesus removes difficulty before he asks us to step out in faith. We think the water has to be calm before we can walk on it. But Peter walked on raging water. The waves didn't stop until after he and Jesus were back in the boat. Jesus enters chaos. He walks through it. And sometimes he invites us to step out into it with him. Not because it's safe, but because he is. Peter's faith didn't fail because the storm was too strong. It failed because he shifted his focus from Jesus to the circumstances. And even then, even in that moment of sinking, Jesus was close enough to catch him. Authority over chaos doesn't mean the absence of chaos. It means the presence of the one who commands it. The crowd had been with Jesus all day. They had followed him to a desolate place, drawn by his teaching and the healings they had witnessed. Now it was late, and they were hungry. More than 5,000 people with nothing to eat. The disciples came to Jesus with the practical concern, Send the crowds away so they can go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus responded with something unexpected. "You give them something to eat." The disciples were baffled. Philip did the math quickly. 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. They were thinking in terms of scarcity, limited resources, impossible odds. Andrew offered a small piece of information. "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many?" 5 loaves, 2 fish. Barely enough for one person, let alone a multitude. Jesus didn't argue with their assessment. He didn't explain how it would work. He simply told them to have the people sit down in groups. Then he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looked up to heaven, gave thanks, and broke them. He gave the pieces to the disciples, and the disciples distributed them to the crowd, and everyone ate. Not just a taste, not just enough to survive. They ate until they were satisfied. When the meal was over, the disciples gathered the leftovers, 12 baskets full, more than they started with. Here's what makes this miracle so instructive. Jesus involved the disciples. He could have fed the crowd directly without their participation. Instead, he put them in the position of distributing what he provided. They handed out bread that shouldn't have been enough, and they watched it multiply in their hands. The boy gave what he had. It wasn't much. It didn't seem significant. But he released it into the hands of Jesus, and it became abundance for thousands. That's the rhythm of God's provision. He multiplies what we release, not what we hoard. He asks us to bring what we have, however small, and trust him with the outcome. The disciples saw scarcity. Jesus saw an opportunity to reveal the Father's generosity. Provision begins with surrender. And when we place what little we have into the hands of Jesus, we discover that his mathematics don't work the way ours do. The house was packed. Jesus was teaching in Capernaum, and the crowd had grown so large that there was no room left, not even outside the door. People pressed in from every side, eager to hear him speak. 4 men arrived, carrying their paralyzed friend on a mat. They had brought him to Jesus for healing, but when they reached the house, they couldn't get through. The crowd was impenetrable. So they went up to the roof, dug through it, and lowered their friend down on ropes until he was lying right in front of Jesus. Jesus saw their faith, not just the paralyzed man's faith, but the faith of the men who carried him, who refused to let obstacles stop them, who literally tore apart a roof to bring their friend to the only one who could help. And then Jesus said something no one expected. "Son, your sins are forgiven," not "be healed," not "rise and walk." He forgave the man's sins. The scribes sitting there immediately began reasoning in their hearts. Why does this man speak like that? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? They didn't say it out loud, but Jesus knew what they were thinking. He turned to them and asked, "Why do you question these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Rise, take up your bed, and walk'?" It was a brilliant question. Both statements are impossible for a human to accomplish. Saying either one without the power to back it up is meaningless. But forgiveness is invisible. Healing can be verified. Jesus continued, "But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." He turned to the paralytic. "I say to you, rise, pick up your bed, and go home." And immediately the man stood up, took his mat, and walked out in front of everyone. The crowd was amazed. They glorified God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." But the scribes weren't celebrating. Jesus had just claimed divine authority in the most public way possible. Forgiveness of sins belonged to God alone, and Jesus had declared that authority as his own. Healing amazed the crowd. Forgiveness exposed their hearts. The paralytic walked out of that house with more than restored legs. He walked out forgiven, declared clean before God, released from the weight that no physician could touch. Authority over sin precedes authority over sickness. And when Jesus heals the deeper wound first, he reveals that his mission was never about fixing bodies alone. It was about restoring souls. Jesus crossed the Sea of Galilee and arrived in the region of the Gerasenes. As soon as he stepped out of the boat, a man came running toward him from the tombs. This man lived among the dead. He was naked, violent, tormented. The townspeople had tried to bind him with chains and shackles, but he broke them apart. No one could subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the tombs and on the mountains, crying out and cutting himself with stones. He was isolated, dangerous, possessed by demons so numerous they called themselves Legion. When the man saw Jesus from a distance, he ran to him and fell down before him. But it wasn't the man speaking, it was the demons inside him crying out, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." Jesus had already commanded the unclean spirit to come out. The demons knew who he was. They knew his authority, and they begged him not to send them out of the region. There was a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside. The demons pleaded with Jesus, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." Jesus gave them permission. The unclean spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd, about 2,000 of them, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned. The herdsmen fled and told everyone in the city and countryside what had happened. People came out to see for themselves, and when they arrived, they found the man who had been possessed sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. The man who had terrorized the region, who had been too violent to control, was now calm, restored, free. The people were afraid. They weren't afraid of the demons anymore. They were afraid of Jesus. They saw what he had done, and instead of celebrating the man's deliverance, they begged Jesus to leave their region. Liberation had cost them something. 2,000 pigs were gone. Their economy was disrupted, and the power that had freed this man was too unsettling, too unpredictable, too beyond their control. The man who had been delivered begged to go with Jesus, but Jesus told him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. One man was liberated from torment and isolation. An entire town chose convenience over revelation. Freedom can be inconvenient, deliverance can disrupt, and sometimes the most stunning miracle is the one people ask to leave. Jesus took Peter, James, and John up a high mountain, just the four of them. No crowd, no spectacle, no public announcement. And there, on the mountain, something happened that wasn't a miracle in the way we usually define miracles. Jesus didn't heal anyone. He didn't cast out demons. He didn't multiply food or calm a storm. He was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun. His clothes became dazzling white, brighter than any bleach could make them. And suddenly, Moses and Elijah appeared, standing there with him, talking with him about his departure, his death, which he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem. Peter, overwhelmed and not knowing what to say, blurted out, "Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He was still speaking when a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came from the cloud. "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." The disciples fell on their faces, terrified. Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Rise and have no fear." When they looked up, Moses and Elijah were gone. It was only Jesus. This moment stands apart from every other miracle in Jesus' ministry. Nothing was broken and then fixed. Nothing was changed from one state to another. Instead, the veil was pulled back. For just a moment, the glory that Jesus had always possessed was revealed. He didn't become glorious on that mountain. He is glorious. The transfiguration was a revelation. Peter, James, and John saw Jesus as he truly is. They saw him in conversation with Moses, the lawgiver, and Elijah, the prophet. They saw the continuity of God's plan, the fulfillment of everything the law and the prophets had pointed toward, and they heard the voice of the Father affirming what Jesus had been saying all along. "This is my Son. Listen to him." The miracles throughout Jesus' ministry revealed his authority over sickness, death, nature, and darkness. But the transfiguration revealed something deeper. It revealed his identity as the eternal Son of God, clothed in human flesh, carrying glory that the world couldn't contain. Jesus didn't need to prove who he was. He needed to reveal it. And for 3 disciples on a mountain, the revelation changed everything. By now, you've probably noticed something. These miracles weren't random acts of power. They built on each other, each one revealing more about who Jesus actually was. He spoke to the dead, and they came back. He gave sight to the blind, and it cost them everything. He honored hidden faith, confronted fear, fed thousands, forgave sins, walked through storms, and freed people from darkness no one else could touch. And then, on a mountain, he let 3 men see the glory he'd been carrying all along. Every miracle asked a question: who can raise the dead? Who decides what's clean and what isn't? Who has the right to forgive? Who commands the wind? Who breaks chains that won't break? And every answer pointed the same direction. People who saw these things had to decide. Some believed, some resisted, some followed, some left. Nobody stayed neutral for long. That hasn't changed. The miracles confront us. They push us past "what can Jesus do for me?" toward "who is he really?" even when the answer disrupts what we expected or wanted. Faith shows up when you keep trusting after the explanations run out. So here's where we land. When Jesus shows himself, what do? Do we follow only when we see provision? Or do we trust him into the uncertainty? Do we admire his power from a distance, or do we actually listen? These miracles don't want applause. They want allegiance, and that invitation is still open because he hasn't changed. But miracles weren't the only way Jesus spoke. When he wanted to show how the kingdom actually works, who's in, who's out, what it costs to follow him, why some people get it and others don't, he told stories, parables, simple enough for kids to understand, sharp enough to cut through every defense an adult has. The miracles showed his power. The parables show how he thinks. And that's where we're going next. The 10 most powerful parables of Jesus. Because knowing who he is, that's just the start. Learning how he's calling you to live, that changes everything.